You shouldn't be listening to this. I mean that literally. Whatever curiosity dragged you here, whether it was boredom, nostalgia, or that part of your brain that can't help but click on something labeled forbidden, it's already too late. By the time these words reach you, you'll be tangled up in something you can't easily walk away from. I know that sounds dramatic. I used to think stories like this were just edgy internet fiction too, the kind that fills creepypasta forums and midnight YouTube binges. But this isn't fiction. And I'm not telling you this because I want views, or attention, or even sympathy. I'm telling you this because if I don't, the truth dies with me. And the truth is ugly. There's a cartoon, we all know it. Maybe you grew up with it, maybe you only caught pieces of it flipping channels late at night, but it's one of those characters that got burned into your brain. Harmless, funny, exaggerated in a way that made it unforgettable. That laugh, those eyes, that silly way of moving. It felt innocent, felt safe. But I need you to understand something. It wasn't safe. It wasn't innocent. That character was never just a drawing. I can hear you scoffing through the screen. I probably would have too. But think for a moment. How many times have you seen stories about lost episodes? About animation teams pushing boundaries? About production secrets that never made it to air? We treat them like urban legends, like campfire stories for the digital age. Only some of those stories, they weren't exaggerated. They weren't made up. I stumbled into proof I should have left buried. Proof that that character was based on something far too real. Do you feel it yet? That itch in the back of your mind, the one telling you to stop listening? That's not paranoia. That's instinct. Because once you let this truth in, you'll never see Saturday morning reruns the same way again. You'll look at that cartoon and feel your stomach twist. You'll wonder if its eyes were following you even when the TV was off. And the worst part? The moment you're on their radar too. I've tried to stay quiet. I've deleted files, moved apartments, changed phones. But silence hasn't kept them away. So instead, I'm doing the one thing they don't expect. I'm talking. I'm putting this out there for anyone brave or stupid enough to listen. But before I tell you what I found, before I show you how deep this really goes, you need to hear my story from the start. Because the truth about that cartoon isn't buried in some production studio or hidden in old VHS tapes. It started a long time ago when I was a kid just like you, sitting cross-legged in front of a glowing screen, laughing at something that should never have existed. And if you keep listening, I'll tell you exactly how I learned that a cartoon character was based on a corpse. But let me start at the beginning. When I was a kid, the world felt so much smaller and so much brighter. Saturday mornings meant one thing. Sitting on the carpet in front of the old boxy TV with a bowl of cereal balanced on my lap, the glow of the screen painting my face in colors that didn't exist anywhere else. My parents didn't worry about what I was watching back then. Cartoons were safe. Cartoons were silly. Cartoons were supposed to be the one place untouched by real fear. And out of all those cartoons, one stood out. You'd know it if I named it, but I won't. Not yet. Maybe you've seen clips floating around online. Maybe you remember the reruns that came on when you were supposed to be in bed. He was everywhere. That ridiculous little character with the too wide grin and the voice that made every word sound like a joke. He tripped over his own feet. He broke the laws of physics without a second thought. And he laughed at everything. Absolutely everything. That laugh. Even now I can hear it. It was the kind of laugh that stuck with you. High-pitched, sharp, always just a little louder than it should have been. As a kid, I thought it was hilarious, infectious, even. My friends and I would mimic it at recess until the teachers begged us to stop. That laugh felt like childhood itself, bottled and broadcast. But thinking back, there was something strange about it. Something I didn't recognize then, but I feel deep in my bones now. It was almost too human. Like the actor behind the sound wasn't just performing. It was raw. Like someone laughing through tears or choking on their own breath. I didn't see it that way then. Back then, it was just part of the fun. I remember nights when the show aired later than usual, on those odd time slots networks used to fill dead air. I'd sneak downstairs after my parents had gone to bed, turn the volume down so low I had to sit inches from the screen, and watch as that character danced and fell and screamed and laughed. At that hour, it felt different. The slapstick routines seemed darker, the backgrounds emptier. Once, I swear I saw something moving in the corner of a scene, a shadow that wasn't part of the joke. But I told myself I was imagining it. Kids see what they want to see. And still, despite the unease that lingers in my memory now, those nights felt magical. The cereal turning soggy, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint buzz of the TV screen. It all stitched together into a feeling I've been chasing my whole life. Safe, simple, happy. That cartoon wasn't just entertainment. It was a shared language. At school, everyone knew the catchphrases. We doodled the character in the margins of our notebooks, wore cheap knockoff t-shirts with his face plastered across the chest, argued about which episode was the funniest. It wasn't just a show, it was a part of growing up. And that's what makes everything worse. Because when you build your childhood on something, when it becomes a part of you, you never expect it to betray you. You never expect the thing that made you laugh until your stomach hurt to turn into the thing that makes you afraid to sleep with the lights off. But even back then, even at the height of my obsession, there was something that didn't quite fit. I couldn't have put it into words then, but the feeling was there. The way his eyes never blinked quite right, the way his movements seemed too jerky, like he wasn't animated so much as controlled. The way that laugh, God, that laugh never ended when it should have. Looking back now, I realize it was always wrong. We all just didn't see it. Or maybe we didn't want to. Because the truth is, the character I loved, the one we all grew up with, wasn't harmless. He wasn't safe. He wasn't just a drawing. I didn't know that then, but I would. And when I finally discovered where he came from, I wished I'd never asked. Most people outgrow their childhood shows. They move on, tuck those memories into some soft corner of the past, and only revisit them for nostalgia when they need comfort. I thought I'd done the same. For years, that cartoon was just another piece of my childhood. Fond, silly, tucked away. But then I stumbled across a forum. It was late one night, years after I'd stopped thinking about the show at all. I couldn't sleep, so I was scrolling aimlessly. Reddit threads, old fan sites, the kind of digital rabbit holes you only fall into when you're exhausted but restless. That's when I saw it. A thread buried in a fan forum so old it looked like no one had posted in years. The subject line read, "Did anyone else notice how wrong he looked?" I clicked. Of course I did. Inside were posts from people like me. Adults who'd grown up with the show and couldn't shake the feeling that something about it had been off. They weren't talking about glitches or goofy animation errors. They were talking about things I thought I'd imagined. The laugh that dragged on too long. The way his eyes moved as if someone else were behind them. Background characters who seemed to vanish halfway through episodes. First, I laughed. It was a kind of digital campfire tale. Fans spinning ghost stories about a cartoon. But the deeper I read, the less funny it seemed. There were rumors about lost episodes, ones that had aired once and then vanished forever. Episodes no one could find on VHS or in reruns. People remembered scenes where the character bled, or where he screamed with a voice that didn't sound like his own. A few users even claimed they'd taped these episodes on old VCRs, but the tapes never seemed to work. The footage always degraded, warped, or turned to static right before the disturbing parts. And then came the whispers about the production. A handful of posters claimed they'd worked in animation, or knew someone who had. One mentioned NDAs that prevented them from speaking freely. Another said a lead producer on the show had disappeared in the late 90s, right after the series' peak. Still another posted a scanned page from what looked like a production document. A sketch of the character, alongside something scribbled in the margins. One word, half-faded model. Model. That was when curiosity became obsession. I told myself it was just internet creepypasta, but I couldn't stop reading. I dug through archived fan pages, scoured old convention interviews, even tracked down VHS tapes at yard sales and thrift stores. The more I searched, the more I noticed things I'd missed as a kid. In one episode, his grin twitched oddly when the background music cut out. In another, his arm bent at an angle that looked painful, too real for slapstick. I joined Discord servers, late-night chats filled with people trading theories. Some of them were trolls, sure, but others had details too specific to be faked. One woman swore she'd been an intern at the studio and remembered a locked storage room that no one was allowed to enter. Another guy claimed his uncle had worked sound design and said the laugh wasn't just voice acting. It was recorded from something else. I stopped sleeping properly. Nights blurred into mornings as I combed through scraps of interviews, freeze-framed grainy voice captures, zoomed in on stills until my eyes burned. My friends told me I needed to get out more, touch grass, whatever, but they hadn't heard the stories I'd heard. They hadn't read the same fragments. And every new piece pointed to the same unsettling conclusion. That character wasn't just a drawing. There were production inconsistencies too. Episodes listed in TV guides that never aired. Credit sequences with names that appeared once and then vanished forever. Storyboards that surfaced in collector circles, showing scenes darker than anything that made it to broadcast. It wasn't just fan speculation anymore. I could feel it in my gut. Something about that show was rotten. The final push came from a post I almost didn't see, tucked away at the bottom of a thread with barely any replies. It was from an anonymous user, their account deleted within hours. The post said only this: "Stop digging. He wasn't fictional. He was real. We all signed papers. Some of us disappeared. Don't make the same mistake." I should have stopped there. I should have closed my laptop, walked away, let the memory fade. But instead I leaned in, because by then it wasn't just a story. I was convinced. It wasn't just a story. I found proof. Obsession can only take you so far before the universe starts to shove the answers in your face. For me, it happened on a night like any other. I was clicking through dead-end links, half delirious from too much caffeine, when I found a file hidden in the dusty corners of an old fan archival site. It wasn't flashy, no creepy title, no ominous warnings. Just a single PDF labeled Production Reference, Confidential. I almost didn't click. Almost. The document was yellowed and scanned poorly, the text blurry, the ink faded at the edges. At first it looked ordinary. Schedules, lists of animators, budgets that didn't match the numbers I'd seen elsewhere. But buried halfway down, under a section titled Artistic Assets, there was an entry that made my stomach twist. Primary reference, model, basement storage. No other explanation. No drawings attached. Just those words. I stared at the phrase for a long time, convincing myself it had to mean something harmless. Maybe a clay maquette, maybe a mannequin used for perspective. But then, just below it, someone had scribbled a note in pen. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. "Don't let kids near it." I thought maybe it was a prank. Maybe some bored intern had scrawled a joke onto an old document before scanning it. But the longer I sat there, the more my skin prickled with that old, familiar unease. That wasn't the only fragment I found. A week later, another breadcrumb appeared, an archived interview with one of the original animators. It was supposed to be a fluff piece for a local paper, celebrating the show's anniversary. Most of it was generic, fond memories, mentions of long nights in the studio, jokes about deadlines. But when the interviewer asked about character design inspiration, the man froze. You could see it in the grainy black and white photo that accompanied the article. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His answer was strange too. "We had something to look at. Not drawings. Not exactly. Something real enough to work from. But I can't talk about that." And that was it. The interviewer moved on. The subject was never brought up again. That line haunted me. Something real enough to work from. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming, and it was uglier than I wanted to admit. I went back to the forums, posted what I'd found. Most people dismissed it, old rumors recycled. But one user messaged me directly. Their username was nonsense, a jumble of letters and numbers. Their first words were, "I know what you're chasing. Stop before it finds you." I didn't stop. The anonymous user dropped hints over several days. Short, cryptic lines. Studio basement wasn't empty. Reference model wasn't wood. Some of us saw it once. Every time I pressed for more, they'd vanish for hours, then return with another breadcrumb. Finally, one night, they sent me a single image file. A sketch. At first glance, it was just a drawing of the character, the same kind I'd seen countless times. But the longer I looked, the less it seemed like a cartoon and more like a portrait. The lines were too detailed, too anatomical. The proportions weren't exaggerated enough. And the shading, God, the shading captured depth that no animator needed for slapstick television. This wasn't a cartoon drawing. It was a study. There were smudges on the paper, as if the artist's hand had shaken. And in the bottom corner, almost illegible, were the initials of one of the lead animators. That was the moment I stopped laughing at myself. It wasn't just a conspiracy theory anymore. The people behind that cartoon weren't inventing. They were copying, tracing, translating something real into something safe enough for children to swallow. Still, I didn't know what. Not exactly. The final clue came from someone who claimed to have been a janitor at the studio back in the day. I tracked him down through an ancient Facebook page. He hadn't posted in years, but I found a comment trail that led to an abandoned profile. When I messaged, I didn't expect a reply. But he answered. He was old, his typing slow, riddled with typos. At first he brushed me off, said he didn't remember much. But when I mentioned the words reference model, there was a long pause. Then finally a reply. They kept it locked. Downstairs. Cold. We weren't supposed to look, but everyone knew. It wasn't fake. It wasn't a dummy. It was him. I asked who him was. He never replied. For 2 days I refreshed the page, waiting. On the third day the account was gone. Deleted. By then, the dread wasn't abstract anymore. It sat in my chest like lead, heavy and undeniable. The cartoon I'd built my childhood on wasn't innocent. It was a mask stretched over something grotesque. And I should have stopped digging. But obsession has no brakes. Once you've seen too much, you can't pretend ignorance. The scattered fragments were pointing toward a truth I couldn't ignore. A truth darker than nostalgia, uglier than rumor. Because it wasn't just inspiration. They hadn't just imagined that character. And then, I saw the photo. There are moments when obsession shifts into revelation, when all the pieces you've been chasing finally snap into place. You'd think the satisfaction would be overwhelming, that the hunger for answers would be sated. But when the truth finally arrived, I didn't feel relief. I felt sick, because the photo wasn't just evidence, it was damnation. It came as an attachment from the anonymous user who had been feeding me scraps. No subject line, no message, just a file. My hands shook as I hovered over the download, half of me desperate to see it, the other half begging to walk away. I clicked. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. The photo was grainy, old, probably scanned from film. A dimly lit basement, concrete walls stained with water, and in the center of the frame, slumped in a chair, was something that shouldn't have existed. It was a man, or what had once been a man. The body was preserved in a way I still can't understand. Skin stretched too tight over bones, lips peeled back in a grotesque grin. His eyes were open, cloudy with death, but there was something in their shape that I recognized instantly. Too round, too expressive, too familiar. I felt the air leave my lungs. The cartoon character. The same grin, the same bugged-out eyes, the same bent posture. It wasn't a likeness. It wasn't inspiration. It was him. I zoomed in, even though every cell in my body screamed not to. The cheeks were sunken, but frozen into that wide, unnatural smile. The teeth showed through, jagged and uneven, exactly as the animators had drawn them. The clothes, what remained, were tattered, but you could still see the fabric stripes, eerily similar to the costume the character wore in almost every episode. I gagged. This wasn't art. This wasn't imagination. This was theft. They had stolen a corpse's identity and turned it into a joke for children. The file name was simple. Model_ref_01. I stared at it for hours, unable to tear my eyes away. The more I looked, the more I noticed tiny details, like the faint marks on his arms, as though he'd been restrained, like the stains on the chair beneath him, like the way his head lolled slightly, frozen mid-tilt, exactly like the cartoon's goofy head bob. I wanted to believe it was a hoax, a fake photo edited by some sick fan. But deep down, I knew this was real. That night, I barely slept. I kept the photo minimized, then opened it again and again, as if staring long enough would make it less real. My brain refused to let go. Every laugh track I remembered, every exaggerated pratfall, every wide-eyed grin. It all came flooding back, poisoned by the knowledge that those quirks weren't quirks at all. They were copied, transferred from a rotting face to a cartoon smile. The next day, I got another message. This time, not from the anonymous account. It was the janitor again, the one who'd hinted before. I don't know if guilt finally broke him, or if he knew his time was short, but he sent me one last confession. His words still burn in my head. I only looked once. They dared me, said I wouldn't. Basement smelled like metal, like old coins and rot. I saw it in the chair. He was real. They told us it was fine, that he was donated, that we needed reference. But no donation looks like that. No one dies smiling like that. We weren't supposed to know. But we all knew. We all knew. He stopped typing after that. I sent messages back, begging, pleading, but his account went dark. A week later, it was deleted. It wasn't just the photo. It wasn't just his words. It was the way every shred of evidence lined up with what I'd already suspected. The laugh that had haunted me, the jerky movements, the way his eyes seemed too alive. Of course they did. Because they weren't invented. They were traced from something, someone that had once breathed, once walked, once screamed. And suddenly, every memory of my childhood felt tainted. Every cereal box mascot, every piece of merchandise, every rerun I'd watched in pajamas. It all felt like a cruel joke. We hadn't been laughing at a cartoon. We'd been laughing at a corpse. I told myself that had to be the end of it. That one body, one horrific model, was enough to fuel a single grotesque creation. I wanted desperately to believe that, but the thought wouldn't leave me. If they had done this once, what was stopping them from doing it again? What if it wasn't just one character? What if every cartoon I'd grown up loving, every exaggerated grin and bug-eyed face, every weird laugh track that echoed too close to reality? What if they were all stolen from the dead? The more I thought about it, the less far-fetched it seemed, and the more terrified I became. Because if that was true, what about the other characters? Once you see a corpse wearing a cartoon's face, you can't unsee it. The image sticks in your mind like tar, and everything else you thought you knew starts to unravel. I tried to tell myself it was a one-off, some sick anomaly, a grotesque mistake buried in the history of one studio. But that comfort didn't last long. Because the more I searched, the more I realized the pattern wasn't isolated. It started with disappearances. Old news clippings, local reports barely remembered. A teenager vanishes in the late 70s. Last seen wearing a striped shirt eerily similar to the one worn by a Saturday morning cartoon sidekick. A drifter found dead near Los Angeles, his body never identified, his face strangely familiar when compared to a goofy henchman from a slapstick series. First, I thought it was coincidence. But as the connections stacked up, coincidence became denial. It wasn't just one studio, one show. It was an industry. Some of the missing person cases were never solved, their files gathering dust in police basements. But when I overlaid their timelines with the debut dates of certain cartoons, the alignment was too neat to ignore. A girl disappears in '89. 3 months later, a new animated character with her exact haircut premieres on a network kids block. A man goes missing in 1994, his mugshot showing his crooked nose and wide jawline. The following year, an animated villain with those same features bursts onto the screen. I dug deeper. Contracts, buried in legal jargon, surfaced online through leaked archives. Most of them looked normal, clauses about merchandising, syndication rights, royalties. But tucked away in the margins, there were always strange provisions. External reference assets. Proprietary human material. Even phrases like, all remains to be secured and stored according to guidelines. Remains. I felt like I was losing my mind, staring at these words while the world around me kept spinning. Oblivious. Kids still watched reruns. Parents still bought lunchboxes. The corporations kept churning out smiling faces, bright colors, catchy jingles. And behind it all, somewhere in the shadows, a network of creators was harvesting reality itself. I started to imagine the meetings. Animators sitting in boardrooms, corporate suits nodding along. A file slid across the table. Photos, measurements, sketches. A body in a basement freezer, waiting to be drawn and immortalized. How many animators knew? How many just signed the NDA, cashed the paycheck, and looked the other way? The janitor's words came back to me. We all knew. But if everyone knew, why had no one spoken up? Why had no whistleblower blown the whole thing open? Then I realized maybe they had. Maybe those missing animators, those producers who disappeared after creative disputes, had tried. And maybe the corporations had made sure no one listened. One forum user claimed his uncle had been a lawyer for one of the studios. According to him, there were whole departments dedicated to containment. If rumors surfaced, they spread counterstories online, burying the truth under layers of creepypasta and parody. If documents leaked, they quietly threatened lawsuits no one could afford to fight. And if someone wouldn't stay quiet, they vanished. I began to notice how many old websites had gone dark since I'd started digging. How many accounts deleted themselves right after sharing something with me. How many emails bounced back as undeliverable when I tried to follow up. This wasn't a dead secret. It was alive, moving, adapting. And the more I looked, the more it looked back. One night, while piecing together timelines, my screen flickered. For a split second, the desktop background changed, not mine, not anything I'd ever set. It was the photo, the corpse, that grin. I yanked the power cord from the wall, heart hammering, but the image burned behind my eyes long after the monitor went black. I realized then that this wasn't just research. I wasn't just uncovering the past. I was walking into something still happening, still feeding. How many cartoon characters had been born this way? How many smiling faces plastered on merchandise, printed on lunchboxes, adored by millions of children? How many were built on stolen bodies, immortalized against their will? And how many more would follow? I thought I was uncovering the past. But it was only the beginning. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Sleep-deprived, jittery, too many hours staring at flickering screens and half-legible documents. But paranoia eventually gives way to proof. And proof is so much worse. The first sign was the email. It came from no address I could trace. Just a string of symbols that didn't match any provider. The subject line was blank. The body of the message contained only one sentence. We know what you've seen. I deleted it immediately, but the damage was already done. My heart wouldn't stop hammering. I unplugged my modem, shut my laptop, told myself it was a prank. Yet when I booted up again the next day, the same message was back. Same words, same sender, same timestamp. Then came the phone calls. My phone would ring at odd hours, 3:17 a.m., 4:46 a.m., times too specific to be coincidence. Every time I answered, there was only static, but under the static was something else. A sound I recognized. A laugh. High-pitched, piercing, too human, too familiar. I stopped answering, but the calls didn't stop coming. Sometimes my voicemail recorded them. 30 seconds of static, punctuated by that laugh echoing faintly, as though it were in the room with me. Soon, it wasn't just digital intrusions. I started noticing people, if you could call them that. Figures across the street, silhouettes standing too still under broken streetlights. One night, I caught a glimpse of a man outside my building, staring up at my window. When I blinked, he was gone. I told myself I was imagining things. That obsession was bleeding into delusion. But when I came home the next evening, I found my door unlocked. Nothing had been stolen, nothing moved, except for one thing. On my desk, where my laptop sat, someone had placed a VHS tape. No label, no markings, just plastic, old and heavy. I didn't watch it, couldn't. I shoved it in a drawer and tried to pretend it wasn't there. But the weight of it pressed on me. A silent reminder that they weren't just watching from the shadows. They'd been inside. That's when the dreams started. Or maybe they weren't dreams. I'd wake in the middle of the night, convinced someone was standing at the foot of my bed. I could hear the floor creak, hear the faint rattle of breath that wasn't mine. Once, half asleep, I swore I saw a grin glowing faintly in the dark, teeth gleaming where no face should be. Every instinct in me screamed to stop, to erase everything, burn my notes, forget the corpse, forget the photo. But it was too late. They already knew I was talking. I felt the pressure tightening every day since. The sense that I'm not just uncovering something hidden, but trespassing in a place I was never supposed to walk. And the more I resist, the closer they come. So why am I telling you this? I don't know how much time I have left. I can feel the walls closing in, not metaphorically but literally. Like every shadow in my apartment leans closer when I blink. That's why I'm speaking to you now directly. This isn't just a story. It's not entertainment. It's a record. And you are the only one who can keep it alive. If you're hearing this, it means I managed to upload it. It means the files made it past their filters, at least for a little while. But don't assume it'll stay here. Don't assume this video will be up tomorrow, or even an hour from now. They erase things. They bury them the same way they buried the bodies that became the characters you grew up with. So I need you to do something for me. Save this. Share it. Comment, even if it's just one word, so there's a trace. If the video disappears, if the channel goes dark, if my name stops showing up anywhere, that's how you'll know. They got to me. I know how this sounds. I know it's easier to laugh it off, chalk it up to another creepy internet tale. But ask yourself this. Why would I risk everything to tell you? Why would I speak directly into the jaws of something that's already proven it can silence anyone? Because silence is worse. Silence means they win. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to trust every detail. Just remember the feeling you have right now. The weight in your chest. The unease crawling at the back of your skull. That's not me. That's them. That's the truth pressing against you, demanding to be let in. So spread it. Keep it moving. Don't let it die here. If they erase me, you'll be the only proof I ever existed. And if you ever see that character smile at you, run. The upload bar crawls across my screen, inching forward like it knows how much depends on it. My hands are trembling so badly I can barely keep the mouse steady. Every second feels like a gamble. Will it finish before they notice, before the signal cuts, before someone is already on their way to my door? The room is silent except for the faint hum of my computer. I keep glancing at the window, at the dark street below, at the corners of the room that seem darker than they should be. My chest is tight, my ears ringing with a pressure I can't shake. And then I see it. Not in the window, not in the street, in the monitor itself. The reflection in the glass doesn't match me. Behind my hunched figure, something else leans into view. A face I've known my whole life. A grin too wide, too sharp. His eyes are wide and clouded. His head tilted just the way it was in the photo. For a heartbeat, I can't breathe. I tell myself it's exhaustion, a trick of the light. But then the grin moves, stretches, spreads wider, impossibly wide, until the edges of his lips blur into the shadows behind me. The progress bar hits 98%. I don't want to look away, but I can't stop myself. My eyes flicker from the reflection to the empty space at my back. And that's when I realize he's standing right behind me.